Your turn, Uni boy.
What is up, guys? This is Olympio coming at you with a discussion today about the side deck and the amount of side deck cards that you can have, and should it be increased to 20 or maybe even more. A lot of people have been going on about the side deck, and it's one thing that everyone talks about. When a diverse format comes up where there are a lot of different decks floating about, in big tournaments for example, the struggle comes when people try to fit 15 generic cards, or maybe slightly not generic, that are geared towards the top meta decks. It comes along a time where people struggle because they only have 15 cards they can utilize. And a lot of people say that it's just not enough to utilize against all of the different decks that are out there. If we look at this format has many different decks. It's a very diverse format in my opinion. The top 3 decks that we have in this format are Stellar Knights, Shadows, and Burning Abyss. But they're just not the decks that are around. They're just not the only things that are alive in this format. We still have the artifacts that are splashed in different decks that cause a lot of problems. We still have Light Swans. We still have Murmurs, which are still a thing. We have Constellas. We have all of these different decks that actually pop up and do cause a lot of problems and do have a good contention for the actual meta, and also to win big tournaments, win locals, and so on and so forth. With regionals coming up in the coming months, a lot of people are trying to fit in side deck cards that can combat against all of these decks. But a lot of people are finding the problem that they have so many different decks to go up against that do cause a problem, that they just can't fit enough cards in their side deck, that they end up being vulnerable if they go up against a certain matchup. Now, a lot of people are calling for the side deck to come to a total of 20 cards, and it's something that needs to be discussed. I personally don't think the side deck should go up to 20 cards. Why? Well, because we've always had diverse formats. While the card base is always going up and up and up, there are more decks that are around, there are more archetypes that are around, and there are more problem cards that are around. Just because there are more things doesn't mean that we should increase it to 20. There are a lot of people who might disagree with what I say, because it can be considered unfair that if you go into a tournament expecting 5 certain decks and you come up against none of them and only 10 decks that you just didn't expect, then you aren't really going to be able to side for those specific matchups. Now, I say specific because we can't all have our Shadow Imprisoned Mirrors and Light Imprisoned Mirrors for every single archetype, because not everything is light and dark, quite obviously. But it's a good example of 2 cards you can utilize when you're thinking of your side deck. Light Imprisoned Mirror and Shadow Imprisoned Mirror hit 2 very big types of decks. Obviously in this format they hit Shadows, they hit Light Swans, they hit Stellar Knights, and they hit Constellas, they hit Zombies, they hit everything, and Zombies do occasionally pop up. They hit all of these decks, and what I'm trying to get at here is the fact that there are cards you can utilize in your side deck that hit multiple different decks. While a lot of people do want to side harder for certain matchups for the meta decks, for example, you know, your Shadows, a lot of people are going to be siding against that, Stellar Knights, so on and so forth, it doesn't mean that your side deck has to be constricted to those meta decks. There are a lot of generic cards out there that can be used against other non-meta decks. As I said before, Light Imprisoned and Shadow Imprisoned Mirror hit a lot of different decks that are out there, and they are ones that I feel should be in pretty much every side deck, unless of course you are one of those people who are playing light or dark decks, because obviously you're just going to impede yourself. But there are a lot of great cards out there that people can utilize, because you can use, there are debunks that everyone should really consider when using their side deck, because there are a lot of cards out there and a lot of decks that utilize their hand and graveyard. Bujins are a great one, and Murmurs are too. Murmurs are the one that is primarily used against as well as Bujins. Then you have your generic cards like your banishing cards like Macrocosmos or Defissure that do hit a lot of decks as well. It might hit your deck too, but if you use the card in a very specific way and you use it cleverly where it's only going to hurt your opponent, it's actually not that bad, because you can utilize it quite well. There are so many different cards out there that can hit so many different decks kind of generically that I feel that going to 20 isn't really warranted. A lot of people who are actually calling for the 20 limit are the people that I've seen putting in a lot of very specific cards geared towards one deck to try and take it out. And while of course that is good, if you're going to do that for every single deck and you've only got 15 spaces, you're going to run out pretty quickly, and that's what the problem you are having. I feel it shouldn't be raised to 20. I think 15 is a fine amount, 15 is good enough, because it also means that there is a little bit more of a skill element. It means that if it's at 20, you can just throw in every card that you want to go against these decks. 5 cards are a lot of cards, and it means that you have a much easier option when going up against these decks. Yu-Gi-Oh! Is a skill-based game, because at the end of the day, you need to understand the decks that you're going against, you need to understand everything to be able to, win. Making decisions on what side deck cards to put into your deck and what key cards in your main deck to take out are just a part of the game. And having 15 cards to choose from is still a really big amount in my opinion. Yes, it can be a bit tight at times, but that is just Yu-Gi-Oh! And that is just how the game is. I feel increasing it to 20 is going to make it a bit too easy. It kind of just makes things less interesting, because you can just throw a lot of side deck stuff in. And for example, if we have a tier 0 format, then there are going to be probably about 15 cards that are just going to be sided against one deck. That's crippling. And while yes, a tier 0 deck is supposed to stand up to it, it's pretty unfair. Because, let's face it, it's not that great when you have about 5 cards on your opponent's side of the field that are locking you down completely. Because it's just unfair. And it isn't clever for Konami to do it either. It isn't good business sense. Because, as I just said, that's exactly what's going to happen. If it is a tier 0 format, then people are just going to side so fucking hard against that one deck and ruin it in a big tournament. That just means that people are going to start being clever and picking up older archetypes that are still very good in the format, but people won't side for. A lot of that happened in the Dragon Ruler format when I was playing Herald of Perfection. Not a lot of people even considered the possibility they would go up against that. Yes, Herald of Perfection is a bit of a very tier 3 at that time, was a tier 3 deck. It caught a lot of people off guard. They didn't really have anything to side against it, and this was in big tournaments as well. Didn't really have anything to side against and were caught off guard. If there are 20 side deck cards available, people are going to be very one-track minded and just throw everything in that's kind of good, and not really tailor it to what the format is. So I feel that having 15 is fine. Having 20 is just going to open up a bit of a boring format and a bit of an unenjoyable format as well. So let me know what you think down in the comment section below. It's quite an interesting one, and one that's always going to be around. Like, comment, subscribe, and I shall catch you guys later.